Welcome back, everyone. Episode 2. I know, we're here. Second one. So, before we begin, I just want to make a point of saying it's practically a hurricane outside. Probably not the best night to be recording, but you are going to hear this high-pitch wind whistle coming through my window. So, in advance, I am sorry about it. It might sound funny. I don't know how this is going to sound afterwards, but for the most part, that's that. So, today, we're going to be talking about finding meaning and why it's important. Let's get into it. So I suppose probably the best place to come from is to kind of start with myself. When I left school, I didn't really know what to do, like most people. And I pursued culinary arts as a chef. And for the most part, it was fun. And I was like, I can cook. I don't need to worry too much about where this is going to go, right? And I was in a relationship at the time. I had a different group of friends at the time. I was pretty much doing anything that a late teen or person in their early 20s was doing. College for the first time, experience outside school. I suppose as time passed, maybe let's fast forward a year, and I kind of moved from the Institute of Education I was in to like an Institute of Technology. Not like a university. It was basically a university, but I found that between studying culinary arts, working in the job that I was working in, and getting work experience in that field, the passion started to dwindle bit by bit. And I began to lose touch with who I was. And I think this was the time, in hindsight, looking back at it, when I started to get pretty depressed. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where I was. Didn't know where I was going to go. And I suppose failure was the only thing that came to mind at the time. And I remember around this time, I actually discovered the rapper NF, and his music really resonated with me. And I remember I just kind of latched onto it. I started writing lyrical rap music now. I never really made anything. I had like 2 tracks. But what I noticed at that time, and what I can really see now, is that was my ability to vent about what was going on in my life, to articulate myself. I remember my girlfriend at the time, and even my family, they didn't really know what to think about it. I don't think they fully understood how deep all of this was. Like, where was it coming from, And looking back at it now, I think this was the beginning. It was the beginning of me coming to terms with I was losing meaning in my life. And I didn't know who I was. And I was playing this narrative of, you better get your shit together, Adam, because if you don't, society's not gonna, it's not gonna give you a good hand. It's gonna give you a backhand, So COVID hit. Fast forward again. This was my opportunity. Like most people, if you had any sense and you stopped watching the same Netflix series again and again, you kind of had a bit of time to think about life. And I was like, I do not want to go back into a kitchen again. I had made that decision straight up, wasn't going to do it. And I took a chance on something different. And I went back to the same Institute of Further Education that I'd been to the first time and started doing multimedia. And it was the first time in a long time that I really enjoyed what I was doing. So much so I was doing it outside college. I was doing projects. I was working with my little Canon M100. I see it up on the shelf there. And like that was my baby. That was the first camera that I was experimenting with. And I just wanted to see what I could do with life, you know what I mean? And what I could create. About a year later from there, I got accepted into university, into DCU. And this was the first time I'd been to college in a couple of years. And I remember how tough it was the first time. And I was scared, firstly, because I didn't want to screw this up. Not a second time. When I started college, my relationship also came to an end. So that was quite life-changing at that time. And I remember my granny was quite ill and my dad had health problems that were not getting better at the time, you know, and I was worried about him. Everything just compressed on top of each other. And I just fell into this deep depression. I just wasn't eating right. I wasn't sleeping right. I didn't want to see people. When I was around people, I felt miserable. And I just couldn't understand. I remember going back to therapy and chatting to my counselor about it and working through it. And starting over and opening a new chapter is quite an overwhelming thing for people. It's not the easiest. And I don't think you're particularly prepared for this. The academic system doesn't really sort of say, hey, if life kind of flips you upside down, we'll prepare you for it. You know, they just want you to get into college and pursue your academic, there you go, that's the whistle. Pursue your academic career even further. I don't know what it was that changed in me, but something switched on and the circuit board ignited and a chain of reactions began. I started getting up earlier and going to the gym, earlier than I ever had before. 7 a.m. getting up, going to the gym, just me. You know, I wasn't working with my trainer anymore. I had a trainer, you know, a couple of months before this. So now it was on me. I had to show up. I had to do this for me. You know, a lot of people kind of know that I suppose if you're in a relationship with someone, you come home and they're kind of like, well done, like it's so good to see you in great shape. And like that was gone, you know what I mean? So I had to keep accountable in that department for myself. I started going back out running on the roads again. I started signing up for 5Ks and saying, you know what, if you're going to commit to this, show up to it. I turned around to my dad, great guy for like, you know, wheeling and dealing with cars. He was like, do you want to switch up your car? And I was like, yeah, let's go for it. You know, let's just get something new. You know, I think that car has outgrown me. I need something new in my life. I have the ability to do it. I'd save up for it. I'd get the funds to do it. I essentially started taking on as much responsibility as possible. Now fast forward, in DCU, met new people, joined up with new societies, bought this lovely camera that we have here, the 90D, and I remember my mum at the time was just so skeptical about it because I had college fees coming up, and I remember I bought this and I was like, this is what I really want. And I remember there was a feeling, a very strong gut feeling, which I would always recommend to trust your gut. It might be a kind of a thing of hit and miss. You might be like, oh, I don't really know, but usually you know the answer. You know, if you've convinced yourself enough about something in a positive sense, you'll go for it. And the same in the negative sense, but we'll chat about that in a little bit. And here it is being used, right? A couple of years later, helping me out with what I need to do, you know, being the main source of my content, you know. And this camera turned out to be one of the best investments I ever made. I started doing work for free. Then I started getting paid a little bit of my work. Then I started branching out and working with more people. And before I knew it, I had a little business. That little business turned into a big business, even while I was still in college. And my end of year film, our short film, I filmed on this camera. You know, I shot a short film on this. My skills got better. My sense of pride got better. I was still single, you know, and I'm sure we all go through it. Like every one of us knows that feeling of like, you know, you feel, you're like, oh, I want to go on a dating app, and you go on a dating app and you try and you go, it's not for me. And let's be honest, they're basically gambling games. It's like kind of pay to win. Wouldn't recommend it. But if it's working for you, it's working for you. But that crippling sense of loneliness dissipated for a little while. Now, it still comes back now and again, but that's why I started kind of looking into Stoicism. The moral of the story is, from beginning to now, from this to here, I did 3 things that I found helped me literally move out of my own depression, and I have not felt that way since. And I can say that with confidence. I have not felt that way since. Now, yes, there's been a lot of trial and error. There's been some counselling involved as well. There's been rediscovery. But there's been 3 things consistently that have stayed throughout my journey, maybe over the last, let's say, 4 years of kind of rebuilding myself back up and putting myself back out there. So the first thing I would say, if you're kind of struggling to find meaning, is start adopting new responsibilities. So it's kind of like, I have something wrote down here, so I'm actually just going to look at it here. But every time I come across something interesting, I just take notes about it. And I recommend the same for you guys. I remember hearing Alex Hormozy say, either buy the Nikes or don't complain about the price. You can't have both. So it's like, when you take on new responsibilities, you have to be aware you're going to come with new challenges. And with these new challenges, it's essentially going to scare you. You're stepping out of your comfort zone. To put a long story short, you are stepping out of your comfort zone. You have to be prepared. There's things that you're not going to want to do. And I will recommend this to everyone. And I've sat with friends during really tough times when they're like going through a lot. And I'm telling them, listen, just get back to the gym, right? If you're unhappy with your diet, let's start implementing those changes. Let's start going back out for walks, Let's get off social media. Let's maybe try reading. Let's get out of this rut, right? Because the more responsibility you take on, the more you begin to understand your capabilities. You begin to fortify your mind, become a lot stronger, and you understand your limitations then. You push past your boundaries and you find new limitations. You kind of learn those limitations, you learn to respect them. Generally speaking, it's been one of the best things I decided to do because it helped me discover who Adam was. So that's the first thing. Second thing is follow what you're passionate about. So you kind of know from the story that I told you that as soon as I started falling out of passion with culinary arts, I should have just said no and left. And I felt like I was constrained to this job that I had nowhere to go, right? And you'll tell yourself that. You'll be like, oh, well, if I leave this job, I'm a failure. And yet we forget that every day there's new jobs being developed when you think about it, which is crazy. So you have options, I worked in an amusement park as a safety officer. I worked as a cold call marketing person. I worked in restaurant kitchens, hotel kitchens, nursing home kitchens. So I've done different bits and pieces here and there until I finally found something that worked for me, And something interesting to apply, and I'm going to read it from my notes again, is the rule of 100, right? If you dedicate 100 hours a year to something, which realistically is 18 minutes a day, think about it, you'll be significantly more proficient at that given something than at least 90% of people that don't give time and attention to it. So whatever it is that you're going to be passionate about, people are going to notice. And this is something that I've resonated quite a lot on recently, is that when I work with people and I come away from it, I don't usually, and this is coming from a humble place, I don't usually expect there to be compliments, but people turn around to me and go, like, you're amazing at what you do, you're such a nice guy to be around. And like, I get recommended by people, and a part of me kind of thinks it's not just about who I am. The passion that I have for what I do is clear and evident in the work that I produce and the way that I present myself. So when you're passionate about something, you feel it, but other people see it. So if you adopt new responsibilities and find something that you're passionate about, they're the first two things that you will notice as time goes on, that your life is going to just start to form this kind of a structure around it. And the last thing, and arguably the most important thing, is that you need to understand yourself. So what do I mean by that? Well, I was thinking a lot about the fear and the faith idea, right? And I came up with this sort of analogy around it. Both fear and faith are essentially telling you to believe in something that doesn't exist. One is motivation, the other is distraction. In the end of the day, both will coexist. Which one will drive you and which one will destroy you is your choice. Now, I don't think you have to be a scientist to understand that fear is essentially not knowing what's going to happen. But the funny thing is, and kind of ironic as well, is that when you have faith in something, you don't necessarily know that's going to happen, but you believe it. The difference is, one is quite negative and one is quite positive. So, the expression, have a little faith in yourself, as I've mentioned before in my own videos on Instagram, you can check them out. A lot of this I've talked about before, but having a little faith in yourself goes a long way. You'd be very surprised what it can do for you. You are essentially the vessel that's going to carry you uphill. You will be that warrior with your sword drawn, traveling uphill, getting ready to face the metaphorical dragon that's going to come in your path. And you might slay that dragon, but the next obstacle is probably going to be bigger. The beasts that you'll encounter will evolve, etc. If we're going to keep on talking about this kind of metaphor. So if you can take on new responsibilities and stick to them, if you can find something that you're passionate about and evolve it and get better at it and lean into it, don't just be timid about it, go on in. And the last thing, allow time to understand who you are. If you have to sit at the end of your bed and have a deep think about who you are as a person, and I've had to do this, and trust me when I say, it's not an easy thing to do. You're going to have to bring up memories that you don't want to go back to. You're going to have to understand what's parked in the past, what you can control right now, and what might happen in the future as a result of what you're doing right now. So, if you are somebody that's a bit of a nihilist, you know, if you're kind of sitting here with this attitude of, oh, well, nothing matters, so like, I'm not going to pursue anything, like, it's not like I'm going to make a difference. The irony is, like, if you're suggesting nothing matters, you're giving meaning to the sentence that nothing matters. So that sentence now has meaning. Unfortunately, the argument doesn't hold up very well. So they're the three things that I would recommend. I have a lot more that I do want to talk about, but I don't want to talk on this for too long because, let's be honest, your attention span is not going to last 20 minutes, and we're probably getting close to that. So if you like what you're seeing so far, please subscribe, like the video, and do remember, also, there is the other video if you want to check out the first one that I did last week, but just remember that, like, you are only in control of so much, and it's up to you to identify what you can and you can't control. The last thing I'll leave you on that might help you get through the week and maybe put things into perspective a little bit for yourself is a quote from Marcus Aurelius. It's from Seneca. And it is that we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality.